This is what it's all about. Should we have recommended this to the President of France? Because behind the scenes, these horrific, leadership style from 2,000 years ago, ISIS, said, Mr. President, I hope you got the message. We don't like the way you're treating some of your people. And I am not, I can't. I lay awake frequently when I wake up in the morning thinking about what's going on in the Middle East. I have been for years. So I'm not a proponent of how they manage. I'm more a Mandela guy, Gandhi guy, Wilberforce guy, if you want to change society. Tom, you have anything to say about this statement? It's such a profound one, you hate to mix words in with it.
I'm Tom Thibodeau. I'm from Viterbo University in La Crosse, Wisconsin, where we have a master's degree in servant leadership. When we first started in 1999, nobody knew what we were talking about. I'd call up and I'd say, hello, I'm Tom Thibodeau, T-H-I, B like in boy, O, D like in dog, E-A-U, from Viterbo University, and people started laughing. I said, not a terrible university, Viterbo University. And I'm talking about, when I talk to you about servant leadership, servant what? There was very little recognition. In fact, in 1970, Robert Greenleaf coins the phrase servant leadership. By 2004, there's no movement on Google Informatics. It just remains the same. They track this in terms of how topics are used in the popular press and in publications. Then in 2004, there's a little bit of an incline, and in 2008, it just jumps. And now you see this great interest in servant leadership. In fact, last week on Google, over 2 million jobs had servant leadership in the title, people asking people who would be willing to be servants. Now, why is that so important? Because there's a great difference between servant leadership and self-serving leadership. Self-serving leadership is when people go to an organization because they want privilege, power, and prestige. You serve me. Over and against a servant leader who goes to an organization and said, what is it I can do to help improve and enhance and enrich your life for a greater good? Also, what makes Greenleaf's definition so radical. Now you have to understand he's the vice president of AT&T in the 1960s, the largest organization in the world, and he writes this definition of leadership, and he says, and what is the effect on the least? How is it that we're looking to the margins? How is it that in each of our organizations and institutions we're taking care of those people who are least privileged and serving their needs? So in every organization, every institution, how are we recognizing that everybody's work counts, everyone's work matters, everyone's contribution is significant? And what happens is that people now are starting to pay attention to that and recognize that's very, very important. So you think about it just for a moment in terms of healthcare. Who's more responsible for stopping the spread of disease, the housekeeper or the surgeon? And you begin to recognize how everybody's service is significant to the lives in which we live. All of our lives are predicated on the service of other people. And so the difficult thing of this is servant leadership. And I can't tell you how many people call me and say, well, we'd like you to speak, but do you have to talk about servant leadership? Couldn't you just talk about leadership? I said, no, this is what I believe in. This is what I've committed myself is in terms of being a servant. I had a gentleman come up to me and said, Tom, we're about the same age, in the mid-60s. He said, when we were growing up, what did you want to become when you're growing up? Didn't you want to be the boss? Okay, now we get to be the boss. Now you have to tell me I'm supposed to be a servant. I said, I want to be the boss. You said, tell me I have to be a servant. So I tell my people I want to serve. He said, no, you're the boss. Tell me what to do. He says, man, you got a lot of work to do. It's a shift in our understanding that I go to an organization because I'm going to make other people better. I'm going to grow other people. I'm going to develop their abilities and their gifts for a greater good as to what contributes to the lives of us all. And so that's the work that we've been engaged in, is trying to enhance those kind of conversations about what does this mean. One of the things that we find that's very key to servant leadership as well is a deep sense of understanding the culture of an organization. In so many groups right now, people have been focused on metrics. What's your numbers? I know that isn't true in higher education. At the end of every week, what's your numbers? How many people did you recruit? In manufacturing, did you hit your numbers? In terms of hospitals and healthcare, what is your census? So we focused so much on metrics, and they thought, well, let's go lean. Let's focus on our processes. If we get our processes down, then we're going to be able to improve our numbers. But here's what's really interesting. What really is the difference is the culture. Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for lunch. Do you have a servant-led culture? Does everybody in the organization feel like they are valued? And when you build that level of culture, then what happens, you don't have to worry about your metrics, you don't have to worry about your processes. Your people will take care of the people that you're serving, and they'll take care of one another, they'll take care of your profits. If you practice servant leadership to make more money, you won't. If you practice servant leadership because it's the right thing to do, you'll make more money. So that's what is that the goal is to grow and develop people and then contribute to a greater good.
We've put the characteristics of servant leadership up there. And I would add to Tom that to use the word servant leadership sometimes is a disconnect for people. Frequently when I look at somebody's face, I kind of make a judgment and I say lead by serving. I'll give you a real simple example. I'm in Yemen about 2 years after the coal blew up and going to the Gulf of Aden. In fact, this guy here was with me. So I go ashore in a dinghy, and this guy's right there at the bottom of I take my dinghy up, and he said, taxi, I can help you. I said, no. You know, every country you get these taxi cab drivers, right? You're kind of conditioned. I courteously say, no, I'm just going to do it myself. And so I walk to the first station. There's usually 3 areas that you check into a country. I walk to the first one. Nobody speaks English. Everybody looks at everybody else. They look at my passport. They're not too sure what to do. This taxi cab driver is standing at the door, and he says like 4 words or something. And then everybody's heads, oh, boom, boom, boom. Okay, I go to the next station. I say, well, what do you have to offer? And he goes through what he's going to do, and we have to pick up fuel, which is an interesting story unto itself. And he explains bashish to me. He says, you will never be threatened if you don't give bashish. But if somebody does something special for you, then you can pay them or give them a gift. But nothing will happen. Don't be concerned with it at all. So there's several examples he gives me along the way, huge examples. You know, you come into a situation where you got 3 stories of buildings and a big horseshoe shaped, and everybody comes out on the balcony and says, bashish, bashish, bashish. It's intimidating. No problem. Just keep going. We spent 3 days with him. I asked him at the beginning, how do I pay you? Well, I will, you pay me whatever you think. I will take your money. I will not look at it. I'll put it in my pocket. And I will thank you profusely for the opportunity of serving you. Those were his words. His taxi cab doors were held together with wire, the kind of wire that holds up these ceilings, that kind of wire. And he was absolutely courteous. We ran into some Arabs that were, never ran into people like that before. But man, he grabbed me by the arm and says, it's better we leave. He wouldn't let go of me. When it was all said and done, the crew decided what we're going to pay him. We gave him what we were going to pay him. He never looked at it, and it was very generous because we really like this guy. He put the money in his pocket. He said, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity of serving you. Now, I only tell you this story to make this point, and that is that Greenleaf said, and I believe this, and I've got lots of stories to validate this, anecdotal, but that everybody has some goodness in them. There's a few people that do not, but everybody has goodness. It's a matter of touching it and bringing it out. We all have differences. Everyone in this room has biases, believe me. If you think you don't, believe me, you do. You have been brought up, you have a certain culture, set of experiences, you have biases. Are we sensitive to them? Are we respectful of the other person? Do we really try to lift up the capacity of others? And that is what our subject matter for this is, the focus of our work. You're going to hear stories, but they're going to try to reflect on this, the growth of people. Sometimes we refer to it in other modalities as lifting up the capacity of others. Now, Tom gave you some very nice examples. This is a lady in Texas who has been a consultant. Really, her life revolves around serving. And this is a terrific example to get you from traditional management to the servant leader approach. And this is just her, Ann McGee Cooper. It's her perspective. Tom, you want to say anything about this?
What we find happening in the development of servant leadership, you start with information. You give people information. You can look at the research, and we have evidence-based research to support all these practices. Then after pouring up information, there's a point of formation. You go through this, you think about it, so you never get there. You're always making these shifts. We always are sitting someplace on the continuum. Then what happens after a period of formation, there's a transformation that takes place. All of a sudden, you're acting, thinking, and living in a different way. One of the things about servant leadership is this: you cannot practice it in the workplace and then ignore it at home. Don't listen to anything that I have to say. My wife drove me down here last night. We got in there at 1 o'clock this morning. She just drove me so that I could be here today. She's going to drive back this morning to La Crosse. But don't listen to anything I have to say about servant leadership. Ask my wife how I'm doing. She'll tell you. And any of us, ask the people that we know and we love best, how am I doing? How am I serving you? Is what I say matching what I'm doing? And that's what Ann McGee Cooper's kind of putting up for ourselves. Here's a level of how is it that we might, I'm highly collaborative and independent, gives credit to others generously. Do I thank those people that I'm working with? How is it that people would judge me for my levels of appreciation? Here's a real simple thing. Servant leaders send handwritten cards. I'm like you. I get an email, delete, one of the little 5x7 cards with a stamp up in the corner. You keep it. Christmas season's coming. What happens when you get a hand-addressed card? Isn't that kind of interesting, that level of touch, that level of understanding that other people have made my life just a little bit better? So what happens, we're always on the continuum, we're always on the striving, and then what becomes significant is this: we don't get there alone. We need each other. We need each other. You can look at this in terms of social capital. That's getting a lot of coverage right now. But our lives are both sacred and social. That we depend upon the goodness of other people so that we can grow and develop. So what happens is this: servant leaders hold other people accountable. Servant leaders really care enough about other people that I'm willing to hold you accountable and say, listen, Tom, this is what you say, this is how you're living, how are you going to close the gap? And that's what this does. It gives us one. So let's go to number 10. Motivated by ego drive to achieve personally, motivated by the desire to serve others. So if one says, listen, you seemed a little bit selfish, you realize that you're using I, realize that you're focusing on me rather than we and us. So that's what happens. You can't get there alone. The great gift of my life in the last 10 years is to become friends with Dick Pieper, who's helped me become a better person. Not by telling me what I want to hear, but by telling me what I need to hear. Acquaintances tell us what we want to hear. Friends tell us the truth about ourselves. So every leader has to ask themselves this question: who tells me the truth about myself? Who is the person that I allow to hold me accountable for who is it that I need to become? And that's what really the marked difference in this relationship.
There are a number of things here that have to do with developing people. Gaining understanding, developing trust, collaborative and interdependent, big picture, that's foresight, listens deeply and respectfully to others, and that listening is for understanding. Uses personal trust and respect to build bridges. Feels personal value comes from mentoring and working collaboratively with others. All of those bleed through all of the things that represent these things. So when you hear someone, it's easier on television, and you just say, I'm going to count the I's and the we's and the ours. And count how many I's there are. And how many we's and ours. You will know what kind of a leader you have. The we's, the ours, and the I's. Someone who is telling, directing, superior knowledge. Any more absurd is a superior knowledge to a whole group of other people? It could be that one of the leaders in the group has foresight. You're lucky if you have one with foresight. That's a very unusual skill, seldom found. But the rest of them, the combined knowledge of the rest, have far more capacity than the leader. And for anybody to stand in front of a group and say, I, me, my. When you think about it, they're losing a lot of capacity of the people they're responsible for or the organization they're responsible for. Now, you don't go around telling them that. There's better ways of doing it. And I'm going to let you answer that one today, this morning. With that, we have 8 more minutes left. And let's go to some questions.
Please.
How did you develop it, and what's all involved in that master's degree, servant leadership?
Servant leadership is transdisciplinary, so it doesn't belong to any one discipline, and so it's very difficult to define it. It's not a business curriculum. It borrows from every part of the academic spectrum. So we have a theological and philosophical component. I mean, these are ideas that go back for thousands of years. What we talk about is that we're not interested in always talking about something that's new. We're interested in what's true, what's been true of human beings. So we go back and study what Plato and Aristotle had to say about the human person, the development of virtue. One of the things that Greenleaf wanted to name his movement was applied ethics. Somebody else gave it the term servant leadership. But the applied ethics, which goes back to Aristotelian ethics. Then what we have is I teach a course right now on ritual and celebration. Every leader needs to be a ritual leader. If we talk about the development of your culture, culture is developed by ritual. So you think about this next week in the state of Wisconsin. 2 major rituals will take place in the state of Wisconsin. 1, deer hunting, and 2, Thanksgiving. And it tells us a great deal about our culture, about the people that we belong to, and the way in which we honor each other. How is it that we can accept, acknowledge, and affirm the rituals of other people? We teach courses in ethical decision-making for the common good. How do we make a decision collaboratively that benefits all of us? We teach courses in building community. We teach courses in prophetic leadership, the ability to have foresight, to step out. What are the choices we need to be making today that are going to affect our grandchildren 50 years from now? Our organizations, our institutions, our communities. We teach courses in peacemaking and conflict resolution. So we have a broad range of things in the curriculum, and people over 2 or 3 years. Alicia is in the program right now, and she might be able to speak to this more from the idea of being a student. But most people say, well, what do I do after? I don't want to graduate. Because they've enjoyed the time in terms of the formation, in terms of building a community with one another. To have conversations that are heartfelt and that begin to shape us. Leadership is who we are, management's what we do. So it's always the development of the human person that is at the heart of leadership, not tips, tricks, and techniques. Now here's what's really interesting. In all the research, we cannot find any one set of principles. These are not the set of principles that if you got Greenleaf's 10 characteristics, you'd be a great leader. Here's the difference of all people who are effective leaders. They've suffered. Every effective leader suffered. That's why everybody in this room knows what leadership is. And it comes out of that suffering that builds levels of compassion, empathy, and the ability to commit oneself to others. So, thank you. Well, 2 things that I'll say is this. You can elect people, and you can give them positions of authority. You can give people titles, but you can't make them leaders. People who choose who they will follow. So that's one of the things. Also, a leader is somebody who brings people from different perspectives together for a greater good. Isn't that leadership? If you're just talking to people who agree with you, If you're only talking to people who are going to pat you on the back, you're not a leader, you're a member of a fraternity. Leaders are people who stand in the midst, right in the gap, and gather people together. One of the things that we have to change, and this isn't just in terms of people running for political office, but in this country we have developed a bad habit, and this is it. We start to argue before we understand. We begin to have a conversation with people, and 2 sentences in, we determine what side of an issue that they're on. Issues divide, ideas unite. What are the ideas that we need to unite people, to bring people together for a greater good? That's what leadership does. And we talk about everything happening at the national level, and right now we're having a year-long debate and spectacle about people running for the office of president. But think about it for just a moment. Even to think that we're going to elect one person that's going to lead 310 million people sounds stupid. We all need to be leaders in this. If I was going to say anything, we have to reignite what it is to be a citizen. And how is it that I'm taking responsibility for my family, my neighborhood, my community, and the actions that I take each and every day for one another? So I think that would be my response. Also, I would like to say this. It's very easy to criticize people for political office, running for political office. How many of you want your children to run for public office? How many of you want your child? How many of you? See, what's really interesting, we deconstruct our institutions, criticize anybody who's in a leadership role, and then want to be served well. So and this is what Greenleaf had to say, is that oftentimes the seekers determine the leaders. And so I think all of us have to enter into a more civil and thoughtful, respectful conversations with each other about things that matter. But thank you about bringing about politics, because we oftentimes do not want to talk about it, and exactly that's what we have to talk about.
And I would add that there are people in public office that are true patriots. They have the nation, their communities, their boards in mind. And there's lots of examples, but they have no need to get credit. None. And if you look hard, they're all over the place. I meet them at every public meeting. 2 nights ago, a lady who allowed a bunch of things to happen in Milwaukee County. She led the political part of it. I had never met her. I had heard the name, but it was not somebody that sought publicity. And she did some pretty profound things. And she's only 32 years old. So they're all over. We will have towards the end of this meeting, a list of what is classified, what is identified as servant-led companies in this country, and many of them in this state. So you'll see some examples, but they are not people that seek. Look at me. It's just the opposite. People understand the walk. They understand what you represent. They understand your heart. Those are powerful things. I'm a pretty old guy, but I will tell you, I've tried to manage my life this way. I've struggled. I've done plenty of bleeding, to Tom's point, and you learn really well when you're bleeding. But the feedback you get on your life's journey is nothing you seek, but my, is it rich.